Poor elderly woman inherits an old house, but what she discovers inside changes her life. Mrs. Dorothy adjusted the brown shawl over her graying hair and took a deep breath. The crumpled paper in her hands trembled slightly as she read once more the words she still couldn't believe. Inheritance, house, Aunt Beatrice. Names that made no sense in her 70-year life, marked by the daily struggle to survive. The news had come through a tired mailman who climbed the 3 flights of stairs of the tenement where she had lived for nearly 30 years. The official envelope felt too heavy for her hands, calloused from washing other people's clothes. Now, standing there on the red dirt road, with her worn-out suitcase beside her, and the cane that had accompanied her since the fall she had suffered 5 years ago, she tried to process what was happening. The house before her wasn't the ruins she expected to find. The adobe wall still stood firm, the colonial tile roof showed only a few spots where moss had grown, and the wooden windows, though faded by time, still held intact glass. The silence of the countryside in rural Louisiana contrasted drastically with the constant noise of the outskirts of New Orleans where she lived. "Is this really it?" she murmured to herself, checking the address on the paper again. St. Anthony's Farm, Magnolia Road, kilometer 15. There was no doubt. That was the property that, according to the lawyer, now belonged to her. The lawyer, Dr. Richard Thompson, a middle-aged man who had received her in his modest office in the center of the nearest city, Baton Rouge, with an expression that mixed professionalism and something she couldn't identify. Perhaps it was pity or surprise. He had explained that Beatrice Grace Johnson had passed away 3 months ago and left in her will that all her assets should be given to her niece, Dorothy Grace Johnson. "But, Doctor, I don't have an aunt named Beatrice," she had protested, sitting in the worn leather chair of the office. "I was always an only child. My mother told me it was just the 2 of us in the world." The lawyer had hesitated before answering, nervously adjusting his glasses. "Mrs. Dorothy, there are some complex matters involving this inheritance, matters that perhaps you'd better discover on your own." The deceased left very specific instructions about that. Now, facing the house that was supposedly hers, Dorothy felt the weight of those mysterious words. She picked up the suitcase with one hand, leaned on the cane with the other, and walked slowly toward the solid wooden door. The key the lawyer had given her seemed old, handcrafted, with details suggesting it had been made decades ago. The bolt gave way with a creak that echoed through the empty interior. The smell that greeted her was a mixture of mold, old wood, and something vaguely floral, as if someone had left dried flowers scattered throughout the house. The light coming through the windows revealed furniture covered with white sheets, like silent ghosts guarding secrets. Dorothy took a few cautious steps, testing the resistance of the wooden floor. Each plank produced a different sound under her feet, a melancholy symphony that seemed to tell stories of years of solitude. Then it happened. As she headed toward what appeared to be the main room, her right foot went through a rotten plank, making her lose her balance. "My God!" she exclaimed, holding onto the cane to avoid falling completely. When she managed to steady herself and looked at the hole that had formed in the floor, her heart raced. There, beneath the broken plank, was a dark cavity, and inside it she could see the edge of something that looked like paper. With difficulty she knelt and tried to reach the object. Her fingers touched what felt like an envelope. No, several envelopes. A bundle of them tied with a faded red string. When she finally managed to pull them out from the opening, her hands trembled more than before. The papers were yellowed with age, and the handwriting on the front of the first envelope was delicate, feminine. "To my lost sister," it read in careful script. Dorothy felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. Sister? What sister? She had always believed she was an only child. With trembling fingers she opened the first envelope. The letter inside was dated 15 years ago. "Dear sister, I know you don't know I exist, just as I spent most of my life unaware of you. But now, after searching for so long, after suffering with this inexplicable emptiness in my heart, I have finally discovered the truth about the 2 of us. We are twins, my dear Dorothy. We were born together and separated as babies for reasons that still make me cry with anger and sadness. You were taken by our Aunt Rose, who moved to New Orleans, while I stayed here with our Aunt Catherine, who raised me as her own. I'm writing this letter even though I know you may never read it, because I need to somehow speak with you, even if it's only on paper. I need you to know that I have always missed you, even without knowing you existed. I have always felt as if a part of me were lost somewhere in the world. The letter continued for 2 more pages, telling of a life of searching and longing, of sleepless nights thinking of a sister she didn't even know existed, of frustrated attempts to find information about her true family. Dorothy read every word with tears streaming down her face, trying to process the revelation that completely changed everything she thought she knew about her own story. There were more letters in the bundle, dozens of them, each one dated from different years, each one telling a piece of Beatrice's life, each one demonstrating a deep love and inconsolable longing for a sister she had never met. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Dorothy remained there on the living room floor, surrounded by the scattered letters, trying to understand what was happening to her life. The tears came in waves, alternating between sadness for the sister she never knew and a strange sense of relief, as if she had finally found the answer to a question she didn't even know she carried. The second letter she opened was dated 10 years ago. My dear Dorothy, today marks 5 years since I discovered you, and I still haven't had the courage to look for you. I know where you live. I know you work washing clothes. I know you've had a hard life. I also know that our Aunt Rose passed away long ago, and that you were left alone in the world, just like me here. Fear paralyzes me. What if you don't want to know me? What if you've already started a family, and I'm just an inconvenience? What if the truth about our separation hurts you as it hurt me? I prefer to stay here, taking care of this house that our Aunt Catherine left me, imagining what it would be like to have you here with me. Today, I planted 2 jaboticaba saplings in the yard, one for me and one for you. Every day I water both, talking to yours as if I were talking to you. I tell you about my day, about things I see on television, about the neighbors. It may sound crazy, but it's the way I found to feel close to you. Dorothy got up with difficulty and walked to one of the windows overlooking the backyard. And there they were, 2 jaboticaba trees, already grown, planted side by side, their branches intertwined as if embracing each other. The sight made her cry even more intensely. She returned to the letters. The third was more recent, from just 2 years ago. Dorothy, my eternal sister, I am growing old and sick. The doctor says my heart is weak, that I need to be careful. This makes me desperate because it means I might leave this world without ever having the chance to hug you, to look into your eyes and see my own reflection, like we used to do when we were babies, or so I've been told. I decided I need to do something. I can't live with this regret any longer. I've already hired a private investigator, Mr. Joseph Charles, who works in New Orleans. He will look for you, and when he finds you, I will have the courage to show up at your door. I will hug you and we will cry together for all those lost years. This may be my last chance to have a real family. It may be our last chance to be happy. Dorothy sat down heavily in a nearby chair, still holding the letter. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions and questions. Why had her Aunt Rose never told her about Beatrice? Why had she kept the existence of a twin sister a secret? And more importantly, why had Beatrice never managed to find her if she had hired an investigator? She opened more letters, searching for answers. One of them, dated just 6 months ago, brought more disturbing revelations. Dear sister, the investigator finally got your exact address. Dorothy Grace Johnson, tenement at 157 Independence Street, apartment 23. 43 years washing clothes to support a daughter she raised alone. A daughter who moved to Chicago 10 years ago in search of a better life. I know everything about you now. I know you went hungry as a child, that you've worked since you were 12, that you never married because you dedicated your entire life to your daughter Emily. I know you are a strong and resilient woman, and that fills me with pride to have a sister like you. I also found out why we never met before. Our Aunt Rose lied to you. She told you that you were an only child because she was afraid that you would want to meet this part of the family and discover that she had no right to keep you. Our Aunt Rose wasn't our real aunt. She was a family employee who adopted us, and when the employers died, she took you and ran away to New Orleans, making up a story about being our relative. The truth is that we were separated not by a family dispute but by a theft. Our Aunt Rose stole you from me when we were only 2 years old. Our Aunt Catherine, who raised me, desperately searched for you for years, but Rose had even changed your last name so we would never be found. I am coming to get you, my sister. Next week I will be in New Orleans." The letter fell from Dorothy's hands. Beatrice had discovered the truth and was coming to find her, but that was 6 months ago, and the lawyer had said she passed away 3 months ago. That meant that Dorothy rushed to check the dates on the remaining letters. The last one was dated just 4 months ago, and it was written in a shakier handwriting, as if the person were very ill. "Dorothy, I am in the hospital. My heart has finally given up on me, just when I was about to find you. The doctors say I don't have much time, but I can't leave without making everything ready for you. I changed my will. Everything I have will be yours. This house where I grew up dreaming of your company. The money I saved my whole life hoping to share with you. The 2 jabuticaba trees I planted for the 2 of us. I also left instructions with my lawyer. He knows the whole truth about our story, about what Rose did to us. If something happens to me before I can find you, he must deliver everything to you and tell our story. Please don't blame yourself for us not meeting in life. The fault is neither yours nor mine. The fault lies with people who wronged us when we were small and defenseless. But now you have a house, a real home, and you also have all my love, even though I'm no longer here to show it in person. Be happy, my dear sister. Live the life I couldn't live because I was always searching for you. With all my love, your twin sister, Beatrice." Dorothy remained sitting there for a long time, holding her sister's last letter. The tears had already dried, replaced by a complex mix of sadness, anger, and strangely gratitude. Gratitude for finally knowing her true story, for knowing she hadn't been alone in the world as she'd always thought, for discovering there had been someone who loved her, even from afar throughout her life. The sun was beginning to set when she finally rose from the chair. There was still much to explore in that house, many secrets to uncover. But first, she needed to find a place to sleep on that first night in her new home. Her home. The house her twin sister had cared for all those years, waiting for the day they could live together. Covered with one of the sheets protecting the furniture, Dorothy spent her first night in Beatrice's house on the living room sofa, clutching the bundle of letters. During the night she dreamed of a woman with her face, a woman searching for her in crowds, calling her name in vain. The next morning she woke to birdsong and the strange feeling of being home for the first time in her life. Sunlight streamed gently through the windows, lighting the room in a way that made everything seem golden and welcoming. Dorothy rose slowly, testing her sore muscles from the night on the sofa, and decided it was time to properly explore her inheritance. She started with the kitchen. The space was simple but well kept, with wooden cabinets that smelled of cedar and a wood-burning stove that seemed to have been used frequently until recently. On the shelves, she found glass jars of homemade preserves, all with handwritten labels in the same delicate handwriting she'd come to know from the letters. "Papaya jam, March 2023, read one label. Jabuticaba jelly, January 2023. There were dozens of jars, as if Beatrice had been preparing to feed a large family for months. Dorothy opened one of the jelly jars and tasted a small amount. The flavor was exactly like what she used to make when Emily was little, using a recipe she thought she'd invented herself. At the back of the highest cabinet, she found a shoebox full of newspaper clippings. When she opened it, she discovered they were all about events in New Orleans, neighborhood news, obituaries, job advertisements. Beatrice had spent years reading New Orleans newspapers, searching for any mention of Dorothy's name, any clue that could lead her to her sister. One clipping caught her attention. It was a small classified ad from 5 years ago. Dorothy Grace Johnson seeks employment as a laundress, 25 years experience, references available. It was the ad she herself had placed in the newspaper when she lost her last steady job. Beatrice had seen it, had clipped and saved it, not knowing it was exactly the sister she was looking for. "My God," Dorothy whispered, holding the clipping with trembling hands. She was so close to finding me. She continued searching the kitchen and found more evidence of her sister's relentless search. In a drawer, there was a New Orleans phone book entirely marked with red pen. Hundreds of numbers next to the name Dorothy were circled. Beatrice had called every Dorothy in New Orleans one by one, looking for her lost sister. Beatrice's bedroom was at the back of the house, and when Dorothy opened the door, it was like entering a time capsule. The bed was made with a colorful crocheted blanket, the clothes still hanging in the simple wooden wardrobe, and on the nightstand there was a framed photo that made Dorothy's heart stop. It was a picture of herself, taken without her knowledge, probably by the investigator Beatrice had hired. In the photo, she was leaving the tenement where she lived, carrying a bundle of clothes to wash. It was dated just 7 months ago. Beatrice had died looking at her picture every day. Next to the photo was an open notebook on a page with a handwritten list. Things to do when I find Dorothy. 1. Hug her for 5 minutes without stopping. 2. Show her the photos from when we were babies. 3. Tell her about our real family. 4. Cook her favorite food. Find out what it is. 5. Take her to see our Jabuticaba tree. 6. Give her our mother's ring. 7. Never let her feel alone again. Dorothy sat on her sister's bed and cried. She cried for all the lost years, for all the hugs they never shared, for all the conversations they never had. But she also cried with emotion because she finally understood where that constant feeling that something was missing in her life came from. When she managed to calm down, she opened the drawers of the nightstand. In the first one, she found a red velvet case. Inside it was a simple gold ring with a small blue stone. A note was stuck to the lid of the case. Ring of our real mother, Mary Johnson. She died when we were 1 year old, but she left this ring for her daughters. Dorothy put the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. For the first time in her life, she felt she belonged somewhere, that she had a history, a family, roots. In the second drawer, she found a thick envelope marked Family Photos. When she opened it, dozens of old photographs spilled onto the bed. There were pictures of identical babies, of a young woman holding 2 small children, of a simple country house that seemed to be exactly where she was now, only younger and well kept. One of the photos showed 2 girls about 2 years old playing in the yard. They were absolutely identical, with the same curly hair, the same big dark eyes, the same dimples when they smiled. On the back of the photo it was written, Dorothy and Beatrice, last days together. Dorothy studied the photo intensely, searching her memory for any recollection of that moment, that house, that sister. But nothing came. She was too young when they were separated to hold any conscious memory. Still, there was something familiar about that scene, something that stirred a strange feeling of nostalgia in her chest. She continued examining the photos. There were several of the whole family, her real parents, Mary and John Johnson, the 2 aunts who raised them, other relatives she had never met. It was like putting together a puzzle of her own identity. The photo that struck her the most showed Beatrice already grown up, sitting under the Jabuticaba tree, holding a picture of Dorothy as a child. Her sister's expression was one of deep sadness, but also of hope. On the back, the date, 45th birthday, another year waiting for my sister to come home. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Dorothy realized she needed to leave that room before the emotion completely overwhelmed her. There was much more to discover in the house, and each revelation helped her understand not only her history, but also who she really was. The house's bathroom was simple but clean, with an enameled iron bathtub that seemed old but functional. In the cabinet above the sink, she found medications with Beatrice's name on them. Heart medication, for high blood pressure, for anxiety. Her sister had spent the last years of her life ill, probably weakened by the anguish of not being able to find her. In the living room, she began to uncover more clues about Beatrice's personality. The shelves were full of books, many of them about genealogy and family research. There were also dozens of novels, especially those about separated siblings who reunite. Beatrice had spent years reading these stories, probably trying to find hope in fictional happy endings. On one of the shelves, she found a thick folder marked Investigation Dorothy. When she opened it, she discovered it was full of documents, fake birth certificates that Rose had made, accounts from people who remembered their family when they were children, maps of New Orleans with addresses circled, photographs of places where Dorothy might have been living. The folder also contained correspondence with various private investigators over the years. The first was from 15 years ago, when Beatrice had hired her first search services. She had spent almost all her savings on investigations, always hopeful that the next clue would lead to Dorothy. One of the letters from the most recent investigator, Joseph Charles Smith, was dated 8 months ago. Mrs. Beatrice, we have finally managed to locate your sister. Dorothy Grace Johnson, 70 years old, lives in New Orleans, in the tenement on Independence Street. She works as a self-employed laundress and has a daughter who moved to Chicago. We were also able to confirm that she is indeed your twin sister through documents we found in the archives of the orphanage, where you both stayed briefly before the separation. You can rest easy. Your sister is alive and well considering the circumstances. She is unaware of your existence as we suspected. Rose really made up a whole false story about the family so that Dorothy would never look for relatives. When you wish to make the first contact, I will be available to accompany you. I recommend doing it in person as it will be a great shock for her to discover she has a twin sister after all these years. Congratulations for never giving up. Soon, the two of you will be reunited. Dorothy held the letter tightly. Beatrice had managed to find her. After decades of searching, she finally knew where her sister was. But then why did she never show up? Why did she never make contact? The answer came in the next letter in the folder, dated 6 months ago. Mrs. Beatrice, I deeply regret to inform you that I will not be able to accompany you in your meeting with your sister as planned. My wife has fallen ill, and I need to travel urgently to Chicago to take care of her. I know you were anxious to have the meeting next week, but I believe it would be better to wait for my return so I can assist in this very delicate moment. Sometimes, revelations of this kind can cause unexpected reactions, and it is important to have someone experienced nearby to help. I will return in a month, and then we can schedule the meeting properly. I know waiting a little longer will be difficult after so much time, but I believe it will be better for both of you. Dorothy realized what had happened. Beatrice had waited for the investigator to return to make the first contact, but it was exactly during that month of waiting that her health deteriorated severely. She was hospitalized and died before she could meet the sister she had searched for her entire life. The tragedy of the situation hit her like a punch in the stomach. They had been so close to meeting. If the investigator hadn't traveled, if Beatrice had gone alone to meet her, if she herself had suspected something in the story that Rose always told about her family. But it was no use thinking about the what-ifs. What mattered now was that she was there, in her sister's house, discovering a story that would forever change her understanding of herself. She continued exploring the room and found behind the sofa a small table covered with an embroidered cloth. When she lifted the cloth, she discovered it was actually an improvised altar. There were candles, some already melted from frequent use, an image of Saint Rita of Cassia, and in the center, a photo of herself surrounded by dried flowers. Beatrice had set up an altar to pray for her lost sister. She had lit candles for her, had prayed for her health and happiness, had created a ritual of love and hope that lasted decades. The discovery touched Dorothy in a way she hadn't expected. Even without knowing of her existence, she had been loved, had been remembered in prayers, had been longed for. Beside the altar there was a small wooden chest. When she opened it, she found more letters, but these were different. They weren't letters for her, they were letters that Beatrice had written to herself, as a form of diary. January 2015. I dreamed of her again today. We were in the backyard playing under the trees. She told me she missed me and wanted to come back home. I woke up crying, as always. I wonder if she dreams of me too. I wonder if she feels this emptiness that I feel. March 2018. I saw a woman at the market today who looked a lot like me. For a moment my heart raced, thinking it might be her, but when the woman turned around, I saw it was just a superficial resemblance. Still, I followed her for several blocks, just imagining what it would be like if she were really my sister. December 2020, I spent Christmas alone again. I cooked for 2 people, as I always do, and set her plate at the table, pretending she was here with me. I know it seems crazy, but it's the only way I've found to not feel completely abandoned in the world. The letters continued for years, documenting a profound loneliness and a longing that never faded. Beatrice had lived her entire life as if waiting for someone to come home. She never married, never had children, never allowed anything or anyone to fill the space she kept for her twin sister. Dorothy realized she needed fresh air. The intensity of the discoveries was beginning to suffocate her. She went out to the backyard, where the 2 jabuticaba trees stood majestic against the blue afternoon sky. She leaned against the trunk of one of them, and for the first time since she had arrived, allowed herself to cry freely. They weren't just tears of sadness, they were tears of recognition, of gratitude, of a strange kind of relief. Her whole life she had felt incomplete, as if something fundamental was missing. Now she knew what it was. It wasn't something, it was someone. It was Beatrice, her twin sister, her other half who had been torn from her when they were just children. As she cried, leaning against the tree, Dorothy noticed something buried in its roots. She dug with her hands until she found a small metal box, the kind used to store jewelry. When she opened it, she found 2 identical pacifiers, faded by time, and a note. "These were our pacifiers when we were babies. The only thing I managed to save from our childhood together. I buried them here under your tree so that, even if I never managed to find her, a part of our story is always connected." Dorothy held the tiny pacifiers in her wrinkled hands. They were the only physical evidence that she and Beatrice had one day been children together. They were the tangible proof that she had had a childhood, a family, a sister who loved her before she even knew how to speak. In that moment, sitting under the tree that her sister had planted for her, Dorothy made a decision. She wasn't going to leave that house. That was her place in the world, the place where she should have grown up, the place where she could finally honor the memory of the sister who had loved her unconditionally throughout her life. The sunset was tinting the sky orange when she went back inside the house. There was still much to discover, but she had time. For the first time in her life, she had a true home, and all the time in the world to learn every detail of the story she shared with Beatrice. In the kitchen, she decided to prepare something to eat. She opened one of her sister's jars of preserves and boiled some water to make tea. While waiting for the water to heat up, she explored the cabinets more deeply. At the back of one of them, she found a box of handwritten recipes. The recipes were all familiar, the same cornbread cake that she made, with the same ingredients and the same method of preparation, the same seasoned breadcrumbs she prepared on Sundays, the same dulce de leche she had learned to make when Emily was little. How was it possible that 2 people raised separately had exactly the same recipes? The answer came in one of the notes that Beatrice had made in the margin of a homemade bread recipe. This recipe came from our maternal grandmother, who taught our Aunt Catherine. I wonder if Dorothy also knows this recipe. Do some memories pass through the blood? Dorothy smiled through her tears. Yes, she knew that recipe. She had learned it from an elderly neighbor when Emily was little, but the neighbor said she had learned it from a woman from the countryside named Catherine. The connections were everywhere, forming an invisible web that had always existed between her and her sister. After the simple dinner of papaya preserves and bread that she made herself following Beatrice's recipe, Dorothy decided to explore the rest of the house. There was a room at the back that she hadn't visited yet, and when she opened the door, she discovered it was a kind of office or studio. The walls were covered with maps, photographs, papers, stuck with tape. It was like stepping into the mind of a professional investigator. Beatrice had turned that room into the command center of her search for her lost sister. A large map of New Orleans took up an entire wall, all marked with colored pins. Each pin represented a place where Beatrice had looked for Dorothy. Hospitals where she might have worked, churches where she might have gotten married, schools where she might have studied, neighborhoods where she might have lived. Hundreds of pins covered the map, showing a systematic and obsessive search that lasted decades. On a table in the center of the room, there were stacks of notebooks organized by year. Dorothy opened the most recent one, dated 2024, and found detailed notes about her current life. Beatrice knew where she bought groceries, which bus she took to work, what time she woke up. She knew that she had arthritis in her hands, that she limped slightly on her right leg, that she always carried a knitting bag with her projects. The notes were written with the affection of someone watching a loved one. Dorothy left home at 6:30 today. She seems to have more pain in her leg. Should I buy medicine for her? She was smiling today when talking to the owner of the corner store. It's been so long since I've seen her smile. She bought flowers today. Who will they be for? Perhaps for our Aunt Rose's grave. Dorothy realized that Beatrice had spent the last months of her life practically watching over her, not out of malice but out of desperate love. She wanted to know every detail of her life. She wanted to discover her tastes and habits. She wanted to be present, even from a distance. In a drawer of the table she found more photos, these more recent and clearly taken without her knowledge. There were hundreds of them. Dorothy working, Dorothy walking down the street, Dorothy talking to neighbors, Dorothy feeding the cats in the tenement. Beatrice had obsessively documented every aspect of her life, creating a complete archive of a sister she observed but never approached. The discovery should have frightened her, but it didn't. It was disturbing, yes, but also deeply touching. Beatrice had found a way to be present in Dorothy's life without invading her privacy. She had contented herself with loving her from afar, with protecting her without her knowing, with being a silent guardian to a sister who didn't even know she existed. At the bottom of the drawer she found an envelope marked, "To be opened only in case of emergency." When she opened it, she discovered it contained legal documents, including a power of attorney in her name, a life insurance policy naming her as the beneficiary, and detailed instructions on how Beatrice wished her assets to be managed if she died before making contact. The instructions were touching in their detail. If I die before finding my sister Dorothy, she should receive not only my house and money, but also all the photographs, letters, and documents I've gathered about our family. She has the right to know her full story. The house must be given to her exactly as it is, with nothing removed or changed. Every object here has meaning in our history, and she should have the chance to discover these meanings on her own. If she doesn't want to live here, I understand completely. The life she built in New Orleans is her real life, and she shouldn't feel obligated to abandon it because of a sister she never knew. But I hope she at least visits this house a few times to understand where she came from and know that she was always loved. The money I leave should be used so she can live comfortably in her later years. I worked my whole life saving every penny, not for myself, but for her. I want her to stop washing clothes for others and start taking care of herself. I want her to buy nice clothes, to travel if she wants, to eat well, to feel like the lady she always should have been. If she wants to look for our daughter Emily in Chicago, I also leave money for that trip. We all deserve a family, and perhaps Dorothy can build with our daughter the relationship I never had the chance to build with her. Lastly, I ask that she plant a third tree in the backyard for our mother Mary, who died too young and didn't get to see her daughters grow up together. This way, the three of us will be symbolically reunited in this place that was always our true home. Dorothy finished reading the instructions with a heavy heart. Beatrice had thought of everything, had planned every detail to ensure her sister would be well even after her departure. She had dedicated her entire life not just to searching for Dorothy, but to caring for her in every possible way. It was late at night when she finally left the office. Her mind was overwhelmed with information, emotions, and revelations. She needed to process everything she had discovered, needed to understand how her life had completely changed in just 2 days. She decided to take a bath in the old tub before bed. The hot water helped relax her tense muscles and calm her troubled mind. While in the tub, she looked around the simple bathroom and noticed details she hadn't seen before. There were 2 towels hanging on the door hook, 2 toothbrushes in the holder by the sink, 2 soaps in the soap dish. Beatrice had lived as if her sister were about to arrive at any moment. She had kept the house ready for 2 people for decades, in a hope that never faded. After her bath, she put on a robe she found in the bathroom closet. It was simple but clean and fresh-smelling, as if it had been washed and stored recently. More evidence that Beatrice kept everything ready to welcome her sister. In the bedroom, she noticed there were 2 beds. She first thought it might be a guest room, but realized both beds showed signs of use. Beatrice had slept in each of them alternately, perhaps imagining she was sharing the room with her sister. Dorothy chose the bed that seemed less used, assuming it was the one Beatrice had intended for her. The sheets smelled of lavender and were too soft for someone who had spent a lifetime sleeping on hard mattresses in tenements. For the first time in decades, she fell asleep comfortably, wrapped in the silent love of a sister who had cared for her even in her absence. During the night, she dreamed she was walking through the house as a child, holding hands with a girl who looked just like her. In the dream, they ran through the backyard, played with rag dolls, and shared food from the same bowl. When she woke the next morning, she didn't know if it was a real recovered memory or just her subconscious trying to fill in the gaps of her lost childhood. The third day in the house brought new discoveries. Dorothy decided to explore the attic, a space that seemed small from the outside but turned out to be surprisingly spacious when she climbed the narrow wooden stairs. The attic was organized like a personal archive. There were boxes labeled by decades, each containing documents, photographs, and mementos related to the search for Dorothy. The first box she opened was marked 1980-1990, early years of the search. Inside, she found letters that Beatrice had written to orphanages, hospitals, and churches across Louisiana, asking about children adopted or lost in the late 1950s. There were also responses from some of these institutions, most negative but a few offering clues that led to dead ends. One letter in particular caught her attention. It was from a nun at an orphanage in New Orleans, dated 1985. Dear Beatrice, I vaguely remember 2 twin girls who briefly stayed at our institution in the late 1950s. They were here only a few days before being taken away by 2 different women. Unfortunately, our records from that time were lost in a fire years ago. What I can tell you is that one of the girls was taken by a younger woman who said she was a family employee, and the other was taken by an older woman who claimed to be a legitimate aunt. I remember because there was an argument between them about who had more right to the children. I believe the younger woman took the child to New Orleans, as she mentioned having relatives there. The older woman took the other child to the countryside, talking about a farm where she could grow up with fresh air and good food. I hope this information helps you in your search. I will keep you in my prayers that you find your sister. It was confirmation of everything Beatrice had later discovered. Rose, the family employee, had indeed stolen Dorothy, making up a story about being a relative to justify her custody. Aunt Catherine, who raised Beatrice, was actually related to the children, but had no legal power to stop Rose from taking one of the twins. The second box contained documents from the 1990s, when Beatrice had hired her first private investigator. There were detailed reports on all Dorothys born in 1954 in Louisiana, with information about their lives, families, and whereabouts. Hundreds of women had been investigated and ruled out over the years. One of the folders inside the box was marked Possible Dorothys. Inside there were profiles of 12 women who matched the age and some characteristics that could belong to the lost sister. Dorothy saw that her own profile was there, but marked as insufficient information, continue investigation. Her profile, compiled in 1995, was frighteningly accurate. Dorothy Grace Johnson, 41 years old, laundress, lives in New Orleans, single daughter, raised a child alone. Physical characteristics match. No known family. Raised by Rose Johnson, deceased, who claimed to be her aunt. It is suspected that Rose was not a real relative. Beatrice had come very close to identifying her as early as 1995, but at the time she still didn't have the resources for a deeper investigation. If she had, they could have met 29 years ago, when both were still relatively young and had time to build a life together. The third box was the most recent, covering the years 2010 to 2024. This one was full of evidence of the intensification of the search in Beatrice's final years. There were contracts with 3 different investigators, hundreds of surveillance photographs, and detailed maps of the movements of various Dorothys who had been investigated. At the bottom of the box, she found a leather-bound diary with the initials BGJ engraved on the cover. When she opened it, she discovered it contained Beatrice's most intimate thoughts during her last years. March 15, 2020. I'm getting old and tired. Sometimes I think about giving up this search and accepting that I'll never see my sister again. But then I wake up in the morning and feel that emptiness in my chest, and I know I can't stop. She's somewhere, living her life, perhaps also feeling that something is missing. I can't give up on her. July 3rd, 2021. I dreamed of her again. We were old women, sitting on this porch, knitting and talking about our lives. In the dream, she forgave me for not having found her sooner. I woke up crying, but also with a strange feeling of peace. Maybe it's a sign that we'll be together soon. December 28th, 2022. I spent another Christmas alone, but this year was different. I feel I'm close to finding her. The new investigator seems more competent than the previous ones. He told me he's following a promising lead. My heart races just thinking that maybe next Christmas I won't be alone anymore. August 10th, 2023. He found her. Joseph Charles showed me a photo of her, and it was like looking in the mirror. Even after all these years, we're still identical. She's alive, she's well, she lives in New Orleans. I'm trembling with emotion and anxiety. How will I introduce myself to her? What will I say? How to explain why it took me so long to find her? September 15th, 2023, I'm afraid. Joseph Charles advised me to take it slow, to prepare the meeting carefully. He said it might be too much of a shock for her to discover she has a twin sister after all these years. What if she doesn't want to meet me? What if she gets angry with me for taking so long? What if she already has her own family and there's no place for me? November 2nd, 2023. My heart is getting worse. The doctor said I need to reduce stress and take better care of myself. But how can I take care of myself when I'm so close to fulfilling my lifelong dream? I need to stay strong until I meet my sister. After that, I can rest. December 18th, 2023. Joseph Charles had to travel and couldn't accompany me to the meeting. I'm frustrated, but also relieved. Maybe it's better this way. The first meeting should be just between us two, without intermediaries. I'll wait until January and then go look for her alone. December 30th, 2023, last day of the year. Next year I'll be with my sister. I'm sure of it. I'm preparing to go to New Orleans at the end of January. I've already bought new clothes, organized everything I want to show her, rehearsed what I'm going to say 1,000 times. My heart is weak, but my determination has never been stronger. The last entry was from January 15th, 2024, just 2 weeks before Beatrice was admitted to the hospital. I'm feeling sick, chest pains, shortness of breath. But I can't get sick now, not when I'm so close. I just need to hold on for a few more days. I need to see my sister. I need to hug her. I need to tell her how much I love her and how much I've missed her all these years. After that, whatever happens to me doesn't matter anymore. I will have fulfilled my life's purpose. Dorothy closed the diary with trembling hands. Beatrice had literally died from loving her so much. Her sister's heart had been consumed by decades of longing, anxiety, and frustrated hope. She had stayed alive only through the sheer willpower of meeting her lost sister, and when she was finally about to fulfill that dream, her body had given up on her. The weight of guilt threatened to crush her. What if she herself had searched for her family? What if she hadn't passively accepted the story Rose had told her? What if she had questioned why she had no family photos, no memories of relatives, no stories about her origins? But then she remembered Beatrice's words in the last letter. The fault is neither yours nor mine. The fault lies with people who hurt us when we were small and defenseless. Rose had stolen more than a child. She had stolen an entire family, a whole lifetime of love and companionship between sisters. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Dorothy came down from the attic with renewed determination. She couldn't change the past, but she could honor her sister's memory by living the life Beatrice had always dreamed they would live together. She could turn that house into a welcoming home. She could care for the trees Beatrice had planted. She could continue the legacy of love her sister had left behind. In the following days, she began putting the house in order. She removed the sheets from the furniture, cleaned every room carefully, organized the photographs and documents she had found. Every task was done with the feeling that she was preparing the house to welcome Beatrice back, even though she knew that was impossible. One morning, while watering the jaboticaba trees, she received an unexpected visitor. A woman of about 50 appeared at the front door carrying a basket of fruit. "You must be Dorothy," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Catherine, your next-door neighbor. Beatrice told me so much about you that I feel like I've known you for years." Dorothy invited Catherine in for coffee. While preparing the drink in the kitchen that was starting to feel like her own, she listened to the neighbor talk about her friendship with Beatrice. "She was such a good woman, you know, always helped everyone around here. But there was a sadness in her eyes that broke our hearts. She told me about you, about how you two were separated when you were little, said that one day she would find you and that you would live together in this house." "She talked about me?" asked Dorothy, pouring coffee into 2 delicate porcelain cups she had found in the cupboard. "Yes, she did, and a lot. She said you were the most important person in her life, even though you hadn't met. She showed the photos she managed to get, talked about her investigations. Sometimes I'd come here and find her talking to herself, as if you were right here in the living room with her." Catherine took a sip of coffee and continued. "In the end, when she was getting sick, she asked me for one thing. She said that if anything happened to her before she found you, I should make sure you felt welcome here in the neighborhood. She said you would need friends, because you had always lived very alone." The 2 women talked for hours. Catherine told stories about Beatrice, about her gentle and generous personality, about how she cared for the house with such affection, always hoping for the day she could share it with someone special. She also offered practical help for Dorothy to settle in the area, introduced her to local merchants, taught her the best day to go to the market, explained how public transportation to the city worked. "Beatrice left instructions for me too," Catherine revealed before leaving. "She gave me a sealed envelope and said to give it to you only after you'd had time to get to know the house and understand your shared history." Dorothy received the envelope with curiosity mixed with apprehension. How many more secrets had her sister left for her to discover? When Catherine left, she sat on the front porch to open this latest letter from Beatrice. "My dear sister, if you're reading this, it means Catherine has already met you and you've explored our house. I hope you're feeling at home, because that's exactly what this place is. Your home, our home, the place where we should have grown up together. Catherine is a true friend, and she promised to care for you as she would for me. Don't be ashamed to accept her help. After a lifetime of struggling alone, you deserve to have people who care about your well-being. There's one thing I haven't told you yet, something I discovered only in the past year that changed everything I thought about our story. Our mother Mary didn't die when we were 1 year old, as I always believed. She lived until she was 40 and spent all that time searching for both of us. I found records showing she hired lawyers, investigators, placed newspaper ads, that she never stopped looking for us. She died in 1975, in New Orleans, still searching for her lost daughters. She's buried in Holy Ground Cemetery, Block 15, Grave 234. There's a small plaque that says, "Mary Johnson, a mother who never stopped loving her lost daughters." I also discovered that our mother left a sealed letter with instructions to be given to her daughters if they were ever found. The letter is with the lawyer who handled her affairs, Dr. Frederick Wilson, who's now retired but still lives in New Orleans. His address is in the envelope Catherine gave you along with this letter. I don't know if you'll want to read our mother's letter. It might be too painful to discover that she loved us and searched for us her whole life. But it might also be comforting to know that, just like me, she never forgot us, never stopped loving us. The choice is yours, my sister. You've suffered so much in life that I don't want to impose more suffering. If you prefer to leave the past alone and simply live in the present in this house that's now yours, I'll understand completely. But if you decide to look for the lawyer and read our mother's letter, know that I'll be with you in spirit, holding your hand, as I should have done throughout our lives. With all my eternal love, Beatrice. Dorothy held the letter to her chest and looked toward the horizon. The sun was setting over the field stretching beyond the property, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. It was a peacefully beautiful landscape, the kind of place where a person could easily decide to forget the past and simply live in the present. But she knew she couldn't do that. Now that she knew part of her story, she needed to know the rest. She needed to know about her mother, needed to read the words a desperate woman had left for the daughters she never managed to find. That night, she called her daughter Emily in Chicago. It was the first time they'd spoken in months. Emily was always busy with work and her children, and Dorothy always felt like a burden when she called. "Mom, is something wrong?" was Emily's first reaction when she answered. "Yes, it did, my daughter. A lot of things. I found out I had a twin sister, and a real mother who searched for me her whole life, and a house in the countryside of Louisiana that is now mine." Dorothy told the whole story to Emily, from the news of the inheritance to the discoveries at Beatrice's house. Emily listened in silence, occasionally asking questions or expressing surprise. "Mom, this is incredible, and at the same time very sad. Are you okay? Are you managing to handle all of this?" "I'm fine, daughter. In fact, I'm better than I've ever been in my life. For the first time, I feel complete, as if I've finally found my place in the world." "And are you going to stay there? Are you going to leave New Orleans?" Dorothy looked around the room where she was talking. Beatrice's furniture, the family photographs scattered on the shelves, the windows that looked out onto the mulberry trees. Everything there breathed history, love, and belonging. "Yes, I'm going to stay. This is my home, Emily. The house where I should have grown up, where my sister waited for me her whole life. I can't abandon this place now." "But Mom, are you going to be okay alone there? It's very isolated, very different from New Orleans." "I won't be alone, daughter. I'll be with my sister's memories, with my family's history, with the life that finally makes sense. And besides, you can come visit me whenever you want. There are spare rooms here, and your mother now has a real house to welcome her grandchildren." Emily promised she would visit soon, perhaps bringing the children to meet their grandmother in her new home. When they hung up, Dorothy felt more connected to her daughter than she had in years. Having a story to tell, a house to show, a family to introduce, all of that changed her relationship with Emily too. The next morning, she decided to make the trip to New Orleans to meet the retired lawyer who kept her mother's letter. Catherine offered to accompany her, saying that Beatrice had asked her to do so if needed. The trip to New Orleans was a mix of nostalgia and anxiety. Dorothy looked out the bus window at the places where she had spent her entire life, but now they seemed different, as if they belonged to someone else. The tenement where she had lived for so many years, the streets where she had walked carrying bundles of laundry, the markets where she had bought groceries with the little money she had, all of it now seemed part of another life, a life that had been interrupted so she could finally begin her true life. Dr. Frederick Wilson's address was in an old house in the Garden District, an elegant building that seemed well maintained despite its age. When they rang the bell, they were greeted by a young woman who introduced herself as the lawyer's granddaughter. "Grandpa is expecting you," the young woman said with a smile. "When you called yesterday saying it was about Mary Johnson, he got very emotional. He said he had waited 49 years for that call." Dr. Frederick was an 82-year-old man, but with a very sharp mind and eyes bright with intelligence. When he saw Dorothy, he smiled in a way that suggested immediate recognition. "My God, how much you look like your mother," were his first words. "Mary looked just like you when I met her. The same height, the same eyes, the same way of holding her hands when she's nervous." He invited them to sit in his library, a cozy room filled with law books and family photographs. On the walls, there were some diplomas and certificates, evidence of a long career dedicated to the law. "Your mother came to me in 1960, Dr. Frederick began. You and your sister had been taken the year before, and she was desperate to find you. I didn't have the resources to pay for a professional investigation, so I helped her pro bono for years. We investigated orphanages, irregular adoptions, people who trafficked children back then." "Trafficked children?" asked Dorothy, alarmed. "Unfortunately, yes. In the 1950s and 1960s, there were people who took advantage of families' poverty and desperation to take children and sell them to families who wanted to adopt. They weren't legal adoptions, they were illegal businesses. We believe that's what happened to you two." The lawyer continued telling the story of Mary Johnson. She had been a young single mother who worked as a housekeeper to support her twin daughters. When she got sick and was hospitalized, she left the children temporarily with a neighbor who promised to care for them until she recovered. When your mother left the hospital 2 weeks later, the neighbor had disappeared and taken you both. Mary discovered the woman had sold you to 2 different people. One of the buyers pretended to be a legitimate aunt to avoid suspicion. The other made up a story about being a family employee. And my mother never managed to find us. She came close a few times. We managed to locate you when you were about 10 years old, living with Rose Johnson. But when Mary went to look for Rose to explain the situation and ask for you back, Rose said she was going to travel far away with you, and that Mary would never see you again if she kept causing trouble. Dr. Frederick paused, visibly emotional at the memory. Your mother panicked. Rose threatened to make you disappear completely if Mary didn't stop looking for her. Mary thought it was better to leave you with Rose, where at least she knew you were safe and well cared for, than to risk losing you forever. She gave up on me. Dorothy's voice was heavy with pain. Never. She never gave up. She kept paying me to keep the investigation active, but more discreetly. We monitored your life from afar, making sure you were okay but without direct contact. Mary wanted to be certain you were happy and safe before trying to get you back. The lawyer stood up and went to a metal filing cabinet in the corner of the library. From there he pulled out a thick folder that had clearly been handled many times over the years. Your mother died in 1975, but until her last day she came here once a month to get news about you. I had regular reports about your life, how you were doing in school, if you were being treated well, if you seemed happy. Mary read every report as if it were a letter from you. He opened the folder and showed photographs of Dorothy as a child and teenager, taken from a distance by investigators hired by Mary. There were dozens of them. Dorothy going to school, playing in the street, helping Rose with household chores. Your mother kept all these photos. She said it was the only way to watch you grow up. When you turned 15 and Rose died, Mary wanted to reach out to you, but I advised her to wait. You were in a difficult phase of life, working to support yourself, and I thought discovering you had a living mother could be too traumatic. She waited longer. She waited until you were 18. Then she decided it was time to reveal herself. But when we were finalizing plans for the first meeting, Mary had a heart attack and died in the hospital. There were only a few days between the decision and her death. Dorothy absorbed the information in silence. Once again, she had missed the chance to meet a family member by just days. First Beatrice, who died when she was planning to visit her, now her mother, who died when she was preparing to reveal herself. Dr. Frederick, she finally said. Beatrice told me my mother left a letter. She did indeed. The lawyer returned to the file and retrieved an envelope, yellowed with time, sealed with red wax. She gave me this letter in 1974, a year before she died. She said that if anything happened to her before she could reunite with you and your sister, I should keep the letter and deliver it to you if you were ever found. Dorothy took the envelope with trembling hands. The paper was of good quality, despite the passage of time, and the wax seal was still intact. On the front, written in careful handwriting, was, "To my lost daughters, Dorothy and Beatrice, with all my eternal love, Mary Johnson." "Would you like to read it here, or prefer to take it home?" asked Dr. Frederick kindly. "I'll read it here," Dorothy replied. "I think I need to read it with someone nearby." Carefully, she broke the wax seal and pulled out several sheets of paper from inside the envelope. The handwriting was beautiful, but showed signs of haste and emotion. Some words were smudged, probably by tears that fell on the paper while the letter was being written. Dorothy began to read aloud, so that Catherine and Dr. Frederick could also hear. "My dear daughters, Dorothy and Beatrice, if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally been found, and that I am no longer alive to hug you as I always dreamed. My heart is broken for not being able to see you grow up, for not being able to tell you in person how much I love you, for not being able to ask for forgiveness, for failing to protect you when you were small and helpless. I want you to know that not a day went by without me thinking of you, not a night passed without me praying for your happiness and safety. Not a morning dawned without me hoping it might be the day we would finally be reunited. I know you must be confused and perhaps hurt to discover that you had a mother who loved you all your lives, but could never reach you. Let me explain what happened, so you understand that it was neither my fault nor yours, but rather that of wicked people who took advantage of our vulnerability. When you were 2 years old, I became very ill with a serious infection and had to be hospitalized. I left you with Mrs. Gladys, a neighbor who had always been kind to us and who promised to care for you as if you were her own grandchildren. When I left the hospital 2 weeks later, Mrs. Gladys had disappeared from the house where she lived, and you were nowhere to be found. I searched the entire neighborhood, asked everyone, but no one knew where she had gone. Weeks later, I discovered the horrible truth. Mrs. Gladys had sold both of you to different people for money. She had used my illness as an opportunity to make money from selling children. My trust in a person I considered a friend resulted in the destruction of our family. I spent the next 15 years searching for you. I sold everything I had to pay investigators. I worked 3 different jobs to save money for the search. I placed ads in newspapers all over Louisiana. I visited every orphanage, every church, every records office in the region. I managed to find you several times, but there were always obstacles that prevented me from getting you back. The people who bought you from Mrs. Gladys were very afraid of being arrested, so they moved whenever I got close. They threatened to make you disappear forever if I kept searching. The hardest part was discovering that you were well cared for and apparently happy with the families raising you. How could I tear you away from homes where you were safe to bring you back to a life of poverty and uncertainty with me? How could I be so selfish? So I made the most difficult decision of my life. I continued to watch over you from afar, making sure you were well, but without interfering directly in your lives. At least this way I knew you were growing up healthy, that you had food, education, affection. But never, ever, not for a single second did I stop loving you. I never stopped considering you my daughters. I never formed another family because my heart was entirely occupied by you two. I lived my whole life waiting for the day when you would grow up and I could reveal myself without causing trauma or confusion. I know now it's too late for us to be a family in the traditional sense. You are already adult women. You already have your own lives, your own dreams and problems. But I want you to know that you always had a mother who loved you unconditionally. I also want you to know that you are sisters, that you were born together and were separated against all of our wishes. I hope you can find each other and create a family between yourselves, even if I'm no longer here to be part of it. I left some things for you with Dr. Frederick. They are few. Some jewelry that belonged to my mother, your grandmother, whom you never knew. Some photographs of us when you were babies. And a small amount of money that I saved throughout my life, dreaming of the day when I could help you. It's not much, but it's given with all the love of a mother who never had the chance to show this love properly. Please don't feel sorry for me or blame yourselves for not having looked for me. You were children when you were taken. You had no obligation to look for a mother you didn't even know existed. The responsibility was mine, and I did everything possible within my limitations. What I want is for you to be happy, to build full lives filled with love, to take care of each other as the sisters you are, to forgive the people who hurt us because holding on to anger only hurts the one who holds it. And if it's possible, when you think of me, remember not the mother who failed to protect you, but the mother who loved you every day of her life, even from afar, even in silence, even without hope of return. You were the reason I lived. You were my strength in difficult times. You were my hope when everything seemed impossible. You were my love when all else was missing. Until we meet again someday, somewhere where families are never separated again. With all the love a mother can have for her daughters, Mary Johnson, 1974. Dorothy finished reading the letter amid tears she couldn't control. Catherine was crying beside her, and even the old lawyer had moist eyes. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion and understanding. Your mother was an extraordinary woman, said Dr. Frederick finally. In all the years I knew her, I never saw anyone love children with such intensity and dedication. She lived only for you two. Dorothy carefully folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Now she had the complete story of her family, a story of love, loss, search, and hope that spanned generations. She had a mother who had loved her, a sister who had looked for her, a home where she could finally belong. Dr. Frederick then handed her a small wooden box. These are the things your mother left for you two. They're yours now." Inside the box, there was a simple gold bracelet, 2 small rings, a delicate chain with a heart-shaped pendant, and a few more photographs. There was also a smaller envelope with money. Not much, as Mary had said in the letter, but an amount sufficient to show she had sacrificed to leave something for her daughters. "There's one more thing," said the lawyer. "Your mother is buried here in New Orleans at Holy Ground Cemetery. If you want to visit her, I can give you the exact address of the grave." Dorothy knew she needed to make this visit before returning to her new home. She needed to speak with her mother, even if it was too late, even if it was just to a headstone. She needed to say the words she never had the chance to say in life. The cemetery was a vast and ancient place, with large trees providing shade for those who came to visit their loved ones. Mary Johnson's grave was simple, but well kept. Someone had planted flowers there recently. "Beatrice used to come here," Catherine explained when she saw Dorothy's surprise. "Every week she would visit her mother's grave. She said it was a way to keep the family together, even with all of you separated." Dorothy knelt beside the headstone and touched the letters engraved in the marble. Mary Johnson, loving mother, 1930, 1975. It was so little to summarize a whole lifetime of love and sacrifice. "Mother," she whispered, feeling strange using that word which she had never spoken with true meaning. "It's me, Dorothy, your daughter. I found out about you, about Beatrice, about our whole story. I want you to know that you didn't fail. You did everything you could, and we know that now." She placed the flowers she had bought on the way on the grave. "Beatrice looked for you her whole life, Mother. She loved me before she even knew me, and now I will take care of the house she left behind. I will care for the trees she planted for the two of us. I will live the life you always wanted us to have together." Dorothy remained there for a long time, talking to the headstone as if Mary could hear her. She told her about her life, about Emily, about the difficult years she had been through, but also about the strength she had always felt inside herself, a strength she now knew where it came from. "You were with me all these years, even without me knowing. Every time I didn't give up, every time I found the courage to go on, it was your love holding me up. Beatrice was with me too, in her own way, loving me from afar and preparing a home for when I finally came home." When she finally got up to leave, Dorothy felt different. No longer a woman alone in the world, but part of a love story that had spanned decades and overcome all adversity. She had a family, a home, a place in the world where she truly belonged. The trip back to her new home was peaceful. Catherine slept for most of the journey, but Dorothy stayed awake, looking out the window at the landscapes that were now part of her life. When they finally arrived at the farm, it was early evening, and the light she had left on in the house created a welcoming sight. "This is where I will spend the rest of my life," she thought, feeling a deep peace for the first time in 70 years. That night, after Catherine had left, Dorothy sat on the front porch with her mother's letter in her hands. The stars shone brightly in the clear country sky, and the silence was broken only by the chirping of crickets and the gentle wind in the trees. She thought of Beatrice, who had spent so many nights on that same porch, looking at the same stars, dreaming of the day her sister would come home. She thought of Mary, who died without knowing that her daughters had finally found each other, at least in spirit. She thought of Emily, who would soon come to visit her and learn the full story of her family. For the first time in her life, Dorothy felt complete, not because all the questions had been answered, but because she finally understood that she had never truly been alone. Her family's love had been with her throughout her life, invisible but constant, protecting her and guiding her to this moment of revelation and peace. She decided she would do exactly what Beatrice had suggested. She would plant a third tree in the yard for Mary. That way the three would finally be reunited in spirit in this place that had always been the family's true home. She also decided she wouldn't live alone for too long. She would invite other elderly people from the area for regular visits, maybe even to live there if they wanted. The house was too big for just one person, and Beatrice had always dreamed of sharing a home with people she loved. Dorothy smiled at the stars, imagining Beatrice somewhere watching her with approval. Her sister had achieved her goal, after all. They were together now, she and her whole family, reunited in the love that had survived all separations or losses, all the years of loneliness. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story about Dorothy and her discovery of her lost family. Do you believe true love can survive any separation? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more moving stories like this one.